And Joseph makes it very clear in verse 16, after Pharaoh tells him, I've had a dream and I need someone to interpret it. It's not in me. Sounds like Yeshua saying, everything I say, everything I see, everything I do, it's what I see the Father doing. I only do what is pleasing in his sight. I only do what's pleasing in the sight of the Father. I have no impulses of my own, because I learned how to lose that issue about impulses in those 18 years. 18 years where I was dying inside. 18 years where as I was growing, I was 12, and then I was 16, and then I was 19, and then I was 22, and then I was 24, and then I was 26, and then I was 28. And I was knowing that who I was and what I was being developed for, and there was everything in my humanity that wanted to come out and get the show going. And there's so much that you and I deal with, don't we, brothers and sisters, where I want to get this show on the road. Come on now. Bring me out, Lord. But no, stay in the desert, stay in the dungeon, stay quiet, stay anonymous, be a nobody, because then when you are released, you will be a somebody. It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Joseph, of course, gave the full exposition of the dream of the famine. Pharaoh says those wonderful words in verse 38 of chapter 41. Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Yeshua having the Spirit without measure. Joseph having an incredible deposit of the Spirit of God inside of him in order to be able to do what he did. Verse 46 of chapter 41, Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh. Yeshua started his ministry at 30 years old. Notice in verse 50, Joseph does have he is appointed to be second to Pharaoh. He does have an Egyptian wife, and she bears him 2 children. The firstborn Manasseh, which means making forgetful, and the second Ephraim, which means fruitfulness. For God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction, and God has helped me to forget all that hard stuff in my father's house, all that painful stuff. And notice, it's very interesting. You know how what do they say today about how do you know someone's a Jew if he has and what do we learn, Kenny? I think if your mother's Jewish, and I think that it became that because of so many rapes and so many who's the father. So they then decided to root it in the mother. But here we obviously see he has a Gentile wife, but the line is through the man. The line is through the man. Ephraim and Manasseh, in the mysterious economy of God, become part of the tribes. They supplant one of them, one or two, and they become, in one accounting, they're like a combined tribe. That was just kind of an aside. Verse 42, chapter 42, verse 1, Jacob sees that there was plenty of grain in Egypt. He said, hey, sons, why are you looking at each other with twiddling your thumbs? Get down there to where the food is in Egypt. Go down to that place and buy so that we may live. And let me go on. Let me go down a little bit here. Yeah. So they go, and they meet their brother. They don't know who he is. He's verse 6. He's the governor over the land. And it was he who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came, and guess what? They bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. There's part of that fulfillment of that dream that Joseph had. And Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly or harshly to them. Jews have many needs to be met by Yeshua, but he must deal with them roughly or harshly to get them to see what they really, truly need. They're coming to him for food. He treats them roughly. This is part of the mystery of what Reggie was talking about, the God of election, the God who hides his face, the God who judges, the God who makes sick, he heals, he kills, he makes alive. He's that God. He's the God of judgment and mercy. He's not just a smiley face God of good times and happy times and just easy going, but he's the God of the totality of life, because that is life. That is what life is made of. Life is made of, at this time anyway, life is made up of a very tragic quotient. What did Oswald Chambers say? You need to settle the matter, reckon to yourself that this is an age of tragedy, the tragedy of sin. This is an age of sorrow, of sin. And God is working out whatever man plans, God is working out his good through that. And part of what God has to do is work roughly and harshly with us in order for us to see what we need to see. So that's how he treats his brothers, and he has different various conversation with them. He asks about their family a little bit. He asks about the young. Let's see here. They say in verse 11, we are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. He was accusing them of being spies. Joseph was. No, we have not come that way. Verse 13, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. Interesting, they said 12 brothers. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. Joseph is dead to their minds. Jesus is dead to the Jewish people. Hey, he's not raised from the dead. He's just your fantasy. But he said to him, no, you're spies. Joseph is being really hard on him, really pinning him back, not letting up, really give him a kind of a beating here. You're going to be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, get the brother. You're going to be kept in prison, the rest of you, be tested to see whether there is any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. So he put them all together in prison 3 days. And there's that thing about death again, 3 days, and now these brothers having to go through their own death. The Jewish people for the last 2,000 years, and intensified in the future, having to go through a terrible, terrible, terrible death to self. Terrible death to all the manipulations, all the games, all the betrayals, everything. Then Joseph said to them, the third day, do this and live, for I fear God. If you're honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine of your houses, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, the brothers are talking to each other, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul. They're thinking back to what they did to Joseph when they did that to him, the terrible things they did to him, putting him in the pit, stripping him. And notice they gained understanding only after they had been through judgment, and only after being in prison. They only gained understanding of their sin after this. It took this, when they saw the anguish, when they recollected seeing the anguish. And it'll all come together when we look upon him whom we pierced and caused so much anguish of a kind that will cause the Jewish people to mourn in a way that the world has never seen. Some suggest it even explains some of that 1290 to 1335 days. It could be part of the period of mourning. That'll be the groaning, the crying, the travailing of the Jewish people will take that long, and actually will go throughout the millennium. That will be always the basis for their thankfulness, and the basis for their salvation will be always remembering, always being kept humble and knowing what we did and the grace of God, just like you and I live, right? We think about what God has forgiven us and all the madness and stupidity and evil that we've done, and my goodness. And so Reuben, firstborn, he answers them. They say, okay, just to back up, we saw the anguish of Joseph's soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. And the firstborn son says, "Did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy, and you would not listen? Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us." The blood guiltiness concerning Yeshua will have to be acknowledged. And let's turn to Joel 3, holding your place there in Genesis 19 through 21. Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom a desolate wilderness, because of violence against the people of Judah, for they have shed innocent blood in their land. But Judah shall abide forever, and Jerusalem from generation to generation, for I will acquit them of the guilt of bloodshed. That's what Reggie was talking about, that specific offense, whom I had not acquitted, for the Lord dwells in Zion. And even that phrase that has been so maliciously used against the Jews, his blood be on us and on our children, that issue has to be resolved. And these brothers, now back here in Genesis, know there's something about that. But in verse 23 it says, "But they did not know that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. And Joseph turns himself away from them and wept." Brothers and sisters, Yeshua has a lot of complex emotions in his heart about these people. He does. Very tears at them. The weeping over Jerusalem wasn't just a little trickle down the cheek. It was racking sobs of what his people were missing. Joseph had to turn away. Going on in verse 25, he gave a command to fill their sacks with grain. And the brothers in verse 28, they're so surprised when they're back on their trip. "My money's been restored, and there it is in my sack." And their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, "What is this that God has done to us?" They rightly saw God in this, not man. These brothers now are coming to a little bit of an awareness here. They're growing up. They're having some deep experiences that are bringing them closer to God. And verse 35, "It happened as they emptied their sacks that surprisingly each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were whooping and dancing. They were afraid." Fear about what is going on here. Chapter 43 deals with Joseph's brothers returning with Benjamin. Notice, before that happens, the father, Jacob, is talking with the sons. Israel, Jacob says, in verse 6, 43:6, "Why did you deal so wrongfully with me as to tell the man whether you had still another brother?" But they said, "The man asked us pointedly about ourselves and our family, saying, 'Is your father still alive? Have you another brother?' And we told him according to these words. Could we possibly have known that he would say, 'Bring your brother down'?" And I saw in this a simple thing. Yeshua cares so specifically for his Jewish family. Look at Joseph is trying to. How's your dad? Do you have another brother? Of course, he knew that they did. He's probing them, but they know that the brother here is saying, "Look, this man was caring about us. How could I not tell him? He should care, concern." Then we go on. See where I am here. They come to see, the brothers come back with a present, with Benjamin. And they come before Joseph, and verse 27 now, 43, and Joseph asked them about their well-being, and is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive? And they answered, "Your servant, our father, is in good health. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. There they go again. And I just had this observation, the father's always well. Our father in heaven. There's something beautiful about that. Yes, he's well. He's always okay. Then Joseph's eyes lifted, and he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son. Is this your, verse 29, is this your brother, your younger brother, of whom you spoke to me? And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. Now his heart yearned for his brother, so Joseph made haste and ran, sought somewhere to weep. Can you picture this? And he went into his chamber and wept there. Oh, how Yeshua looks to have a private place even to yearn. Maybe the right hand of the Father is part of that place where he's sitting there yearning. And it says in the book of Hebrews how Jesus is having, even after everything, all the so-called success that he had in raising from the dead and sitting at the right hand of the Father, he's now waiting. Jesus is having to wait. There's still, it's not enough that he had the 18 years where he had to wait before he became Messiah. Now he's having to wait all this time for his reconciliation with his brethren. And a part of it's killing him. He yearns, he's weeping, he's broken. He anticipates it, he can taste it, he wants it. So much. He so much wants this family. So much. He washed his face in verse 31. He came out and restrained himself, served the bread. He gave, verse 34, he took servings to them from before him. But Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank and were merry with him. And I see an overabundance to the final remnant son, the all Israel. There's going to be, he gave some, but boy, the final one, which represents the final realization of the whole community, the whole kahal, the whole, my covenant with them when I take away their sins, he gave them a lot more. Because he's planning on giving a lot more. And then we have the situation with Joseph's silver cup. And Joseph is he's still working with them. He's still trying to bring them to a place of complete repentance. And he tells his steward to fill the men's sacks with food in verse 1 of 44, as much as they can carry. Put the money in, and also put my cup, probably a very, very special cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, of Benjamin. And as soon as the morning dawned, verse 3, they went away. When they had gone out, they were not far off. Joseph said to the steward, go, follow them, and when you overtake them, say, why have you repaid me evil for good? What are you doing to me here? This is how you treat me? Is not this the one from which my Lord drinks, and with which he indeed practices divination? You have done evil in so doing. So he did, in fact, overtake them, and he spoke to them these same words. Why do you use these words? We wouldn't do that. And they said, if any of us have done anything like this, we'll be a slave. Verse 11, they speedily got down, opened up a sack, started with the oldest, went to the youngest, and found the cup. They tore their clothes in verse 13 and kind of drudged back to the city. Can you just imagine what the condition of these men? And there's something I'm going to be speaking about in a little bit here, but it comes up right here in the scheme, the craftiness of Joseph, in his devices to get their attention. This is a biggie. There's something that in the dynamic between Joseph and his brothers and Yeshua and the Jewish people, they need to, or Yeshua wants the Jewish people to taste betrayal. This is complex. This is not necessarily going to be easy to receive. I've wrestled with it myself. But the Jewish people, Joseph's brothers were betrayers. Jesus' brothers are betrayers. God knows for their ultimate reconciliation, for the greatest actual health of it, and the greatest communion and mutuality that they could ever have, there is part of the process of becoming united and committed and one with God in this particular cases here, with the particular cases of these brothers and with the Jewish people, is that they must taste of betrayal. that in particular the Jewish people of the end will have to taste the worst betrayal. Will not the ripping off of the mask of the Antichrist, will not the end of that peace treaty, will not that whole situation where Jesus said, I have come in my Father's name, and I have come in my Father's name, and you have not received me, but another will come in his own name, and him you will receive. A direct prophecy about the Antichrist. You're going to receive a man who comes in his own name, because that's what we have, is a world of men who go in their own name. A lot of Christian ministries, and the latest ministry from Fort Lauderdale, and blah, 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 you know, and all that jazz, which I don't like a whole lot, and I don't believe we're called to go in our own name anywhere. But the Jews are going to fall for someone who comes in his own name, because Jews like to put their name out there, because every man likes to put their name out there, just like in the Tower of Babel, you know, let's make a name for ourselves. So it all fits into that whole dynamic where there has to be betrayal, and I'm going to talk about the origins of that betrayal in my next little section. But as we go along here, so they come back to the city. Verse 15, what deed is this you have done? Did you know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination? Fascinating what Joseph is using his, he knows it's not divination per se, but he's actually using his identity. I haven't really thought of this, but his identity as what appears to be a Gentile Egyptian as part of his cover and hiding. And Judah, what shall we say? What shall we speak? How shall we clear ourselves? I mean, this is a cry right here. God has found out the iniquity of your servants. They're being brought down. And here we are, my Lord's slaves, both we and also he with whom the cup was found. But he said, far be it from me that I should do so. The man in whose hand the cup was found, he shall be my slave. Joseph is moved. Joseph is focusing on the Benjamin, and hallelujah, just seeing it right now. The Jewish people are going to be, we're his bond slaves, right? And the Jewish people, the final all Israel, you're going to be my slave, you're going to be my servants, we're going to be together. But he's presenting it roughly at the beginning, using the word slave, but you're going to be bound to me. And I'm focused on Benjamin, I'm focused on that, receiving that younger one. But notice Judah helps to come to the rescue again. Verse 18, Judah came near to him and said, O my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's hearing, and do not let your anger burn against your servant, for you are even like Pharaoh. Judah comes forward for intercession and actually salvation. Don't do this to our father couldn't take it. You know, one brother, in verse 20, one brother is, our father's an old man, this is the child of his old age. One of the sons is dead, speaking about Joseph, who he's actually talking to at the very moment. And don't do this to him. Then you said to us, bring him down. And we said, the lad can't leave, but unless they come. Joseph says, but you said to our servants, he's recapitulating, summarizing what he said, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more. And that echoes that hiding, both the hiding and the revealing dynamic of God's heart, and how he indulges both for the sake of his purposes. And he threatens both, or he speaks of both. He tells us about both. You go this way, they'll be hiding. You go this way, they'll be revealing. And we cannot, verse 26, we cannot go down. If our youngest brother is with us, then we will go down, for we may not see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. And he's telling that to, he's summarizing how he told that to Jacob, and we have to take Benjamin. And then it's interesting how Jacob says, then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. Interesting, referring to Rachel as my wife. I don't know what that means exactly. You know, there's a particularity there that's interesting, how he's remembering her. And I mean, she was the original one that he loved and that he labored for. And bore me 2 sons, and the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn to pieces. And I have not seen him since. And he was, in my commentary on that, is that Yeshua was torn to pieces But as we saw there in Hosea, Yeshua says, I will go to my place, and I will come, and I will tear you. This is some of the most sobering stuff to consider. This is so far outside happy time Christianity, it ain't funny.
Brother Mark, one time when I was reading chapter 45, verse 1.
Do we need to say this now? Is this
Okay.
the right? Is this the right moment for? Tell me. I'm just asking you. Is this the right moment for your word?
Are we there?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I'll back up.
Hang. Hold on. Keep it. I want to hear it. Let's keep the narrative going. Now, verse 30. Now, therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, and the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life, God is bound to the final all Israel. Again, if Benjamin does represent that in some way that final all Israel, Jacob, the father's heart, Jacob, Israel, that man, as it was bound to Benjamin's, God's heart is so bound. I love that phrase. Life is bound up in the lad's life. God's heart, God's purpose is so bound up in the final all Israel. It's so magnificent, so powerful, an engine that is driving what God is doing, that he can't take his eyes off of it. Going on in 31, it will happen when he sees that the lad is not with us, that he will die. He's trying to say, Jacob's going to die if we don't go back with Benjamin. So your servants will bring down the gray hair of your servant, our father, with sorrow to the grave. For your servant became surety for the lad to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father forever. He made that pledge. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father? And at this very moment, and with this confession, with this sacrificial offering of himself, this is now, who is this speaking? This is Judah? This is Judah. Salvation, praise. He is offering himself up. And Joseph/Yeshua cannot restrain himself when he finally sees this selfless, sacrificial spirit. And this is the thing, this is the breakthrough that he knows. This is what he's been waiting for this substitutionary, sacrificial spirit to come out. And then 45:1, then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, make everyone go out from me. So no one stood with him, none of the other Egyptians, while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. Hallelujah. And he wept very loudly, and all the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh, they heard it. So it wasn't a little quiet, it was howling, crying, shrieking, wailing.